Welcome to Pretty Lies and Alibis. Let's seek the truth and travel the long road to justice together. What you know, Alibiers. Welcome to another episode of Pretty Lies and Alibis. I'm Gigi. Good to have you here. We made it. It's Friday, y'all. I'm ready for the weekend. We're going to jump into part 2 of the Ashley Benefield Black Swan trial backstory. But before we do, if you're watching on YouTube, you know the drill. Don't forget to hit subscribe if you haven't already. Like the video, share it with your friends, and you can ring my bell if you want notifications of when I post new content. Click that little bell icon. Music fact of the day. What are considered to be the top 5 most successful cover songs ever recorded? Number 5, Hallelujah. That was Jeff Buckley covering Leonard Cohen's song. Number 4, With a Little Help from My Friends. That was Joe Cocker covering a Beatles tune. Number 3, Respect by Aretha Franklin was originally an Otis Redding song. Number 2, Nothing Compares to You, Sinead O'Connor's 1990 cover of a Prince song. And number 1, I Will Always Love You, of course, the great Whitney Houston covering Dolly Parton's song. What are we going to do today? Well, we're going to look at Ashley's version of events that was brought out when she unsuccessfully tried to get the case dismissed under Florida Stand Your Ground law. In the filing, which was over 100 pages, she did tell her version of what happened the night Doug was killed. And I wanted to get that out so that going into trial on Monday, we know what story, according to Ashley, happened the night Doug Benefield was shot and killed. I'm just going to throw up the same graphics I had yesterday. I apologize, but I've been a little busy here in my personal life, so I just haven't had time to go and grab any footage of anything else. Better than looking at me the whole time. So let's get started. First, let's read the complaint that was filed when Ashley was arrested. It says, on September 27th of 2020, John Sant contacted 911 and reported that his neighbor, Ashley Benefield, had just run over to his residence and told him that she had been attacked by her husband, Douglas Benefield, and that she had shot him. John Sant confirmed the shooting took place at Ashley's residence. They give the address. John Sant also told the dispatcher that the weapon was currently at his residence. John Sant remained on the phone and in the presence of Ashley until she was directed to go out and meet with deputies. John then directed deputies to the firearm, which was still inside his residence. Responding deputies entered the residence and began to render aid to Douglas Benefield, who was found on the floor of Ashley's bedroom. Douglas was moved to the living room where deputies continued to render aid. Douglas had 2 gunshot wounds visible on his person. The wounds were located to his right leg, right arm, and right chest area. Doug was eventually transported by EMS to the nearest hospital and succumbed to his injuries and was pronounced deceased at 8:09 p.m. A search warrant was obtained for the residence, and during the execution, it was discovered that a total of 4 shots were fired. 4 .45 caliber casings were located on the floor in Ashley's bedroom. A loose projectile was also found on the floor, and 2 more were found embedded in the walls of the residence. Ashley was transported to CID by patrol for an interview. Prior to her arrival, Ashley's legal counsel had already arrived. Ashley and counsel advised that she did not wish to make a statement at this time. Ashley did, however, make a spontaneous statement to me advising that her ears were still ringing. Ashley was shown to the interview room so that she could confer with her counsel. As we walked to the interview room, I did not observe Ashley to have any injuries, nor did I observe any ripped, torn, or stretched out clothing. A search warrant was obtained for photographs as well as DNA from Ashley's person. I reviewed the photographs and spoke with a crime scene technician. No injuries, aside from a minor scratch on her right side, were visible. The scratch appeared to be old and very minor. Upon further investigation, a witness explained that Ashley had obtained the scratch on her right side the day before the shooting when she was inadvertently scratched when someone walked by her carrying a box. Douglas was found to have been shot twice. One of the rounds entered the outside of his right leg and exited the inside of his right leg. The other round appeared to have skipped across the right bicep and entered his chest cavity from his right side. No signs of stippling were observed on Douglas or his clothing, indicating that the firearm was several feet away when it was fired. Based on the entry wounds on Douglas, it does not appear that he was facing Ashley when she began shooting. It also does not appear that Douglas had taken any kind of defensive or combative stance. After being shot, Douglas fell to the ground, and it appears he may have struck his head on the wall on the way down. Douglas did have an abrasion on the back of his head, which was about the same size as a small patch of disturbed drywall on the eastern wall of the bedroom. Douglas was not found to have any weapons on his person or near him. On October 1st, 2020, a second search warrant for photographs was executed on Ashley for any delayed injuries that may not have been visible the night of the shooting. No injuries were observed. Numerous requests have been made through Ashley's legal counsel to set up an interview to discuss what occurred in the room that night. As of this writing, Ashley has not provided a statement or interview. What is some of the discovery that the state has gotten through all of this? And this is a very short list compared to what I'm sure they have. They did get 2 thumb drives, Google search warrant, Ring videos, a Ring video of Alicia at the park with the child. Now, in February of last year, her attorneys filed a motion to dismiss on the stand your ground law in Florida. It's over 100 pages. This is not going to be anywhere close to covering everything that's in there, but I did want to get her side of the story out there so at least we know what her stance is going into trial. It says, on the day of the homicide, Miss Benefield knew the following about her husband. He fired a handgun at the ceiling of their kitchen to intimidate her. He threw a loaded gun at her. He punched their dog in the face hard enough to render the canine unconscious. He regularly carried a loaded concealed firearm. They did have exhibits that were attached to this motion as far as the allegations that he punched their family dog to render it unconscious. Doug explained during the child custody dispute, as well as a family member of Doug's explained that Doug was wearing shorts. The dog is a big dog, and the dog jumped up on him, scratching his legs. So he shoved the dog to get it off. He unlawfully placed a tracker on her car, and Miss Benefield frequently observed him tailing her car. He was caught by a neighbor at night standing in her backyard and peering into Miss Benefield's home. He punched numerous holes in the walls of their home, and his previous marriage had a history of domestic violence. And they break down that on August 28th, 2017, she returned to gather her belongings and moved into her mom's in Florida. They say, given the examples above, it's not difficult to see why she feared her husband. They talk about her being a ballerina, and just physically, she was much smaller than Doug, who was ex-Navy and trained in hand-to-hand combat and was in prime shape. They included photos of Doug at the gym with his shirt off. They talk about his military and government agencies he worked for and says he was moody and unpredictable. He would go between calm and rage, and she never knew what would set him off. He would often tell Ashley, "You haven't seen the warrior side of me, and you never want to." They talk about them moving to Maryland, and Doug knew there would be no cohabitation once they moved. The night of the shooting, it says Ashley's mom and daughter were walking to a neighborhood splash park. A brief acknowledgement between Doug and them took place. Ashley was in the garage packing items into boxes. After greeting each other, they had a brief discussion about the furniture and boxes in the garage that needed to be loaded into the U-Haul. Doug started moving the items, and Ashley started packing items from the back of the garage. It says his mood was consistent with his prior history, happy, hyper, and animated, with his arms and legs flailing one moment and then agitated, sullen, and intimidating the next. Annoyed they had not already moved, with fixed, intense stares at Ashley. They talk about the order the furniture should be loaded to facilitate Ashley's belongings being unloaded first. This annoyed Doug, and he expressed anger and frustration by stating it shouldn't be your house, my house, that kind of arrangement. We're moving together as a family, making a fresh start, but you're dividing us. Things escalated quickly, and Doug stated it's time Ashley began acting like a wife. Otherwise, he would have to pack her in the pod, a storage pod. It says meaning non-survivable transportation. Ashley took that as a threat in retaliation for her lack of submission. He had echoed that before on several occasions, where he would say, "If you don't cooperate, I will ship you in the pod and you won't like it because it will be hot and slow. If you're going to be difficult, you're going to go the slow way to Maryland." He then said he needed to make room in the pod, and he was not dissuaded when Ashley said the pod was packed full. He demanded the key to make room in the pod. Ashley said she didn't know where it was or where her mother put it. He kept insisting she unlock the pod. When she couldn't produce the key, he got angry. He moved in close, crossed his arms, and glared at Ashley. Concluding she was being defiant, he grew tense, shoulders raised, fists clenched, heavy breathing, and negative comments spewed forth. As in South Carolina, she was concerned for her safety and wanted to avoid antagonizing the defendant. She tried to de escalate the situation by redirecting that conversation and speaking softly and positively. He would have none of it, so she moved away from him to the rear of the garage and resumed packing. Her efforts were rejected, and Doug responded by growing increasingly aggressive and threatening. He began to hover over the top of Ashley in an intimidating manner while she was bent over packing boxes. Fists clench, arms jiggling as if getting ready for physical contact. Ashley feared he was going to lash out. She tried to get Doug to leave, saying she was exhausted and finished for the day. He acknowledged her comment but kept packing and loading. She was afraid to ask him to leave, so she went inside and packed and moved boxes to the garage. While walking through the living room, Doug body checked Ashley. Instead of going around her, his shoulder, chest, and arm made contact with Ashley. It caused her to lose her footing, stumble, and almost fall. She noticed he was mumbling under his breath and clearly hostile. Scared, she realized the pattern of behavior was escalating quickly. Back in the garage, Ashley said she was done for the day and would continue the next day, Doug while facing the laundry room and Ashley facing the opening of the garage. Again, he made a body check with Ashley, grumbling about the delay and her being difficult. With no apology for the contact this time either, Ashley was certain both times were intentional. In trying to stop the escalation, she apologized. Finally, while Ashley was entering the house from the garage and Doug was heading into the garage from the residence, the two met in the hall and Doug was holding a medium-sized assembled cardboard box. He deliberately drove the box into Ashley in an upward motion, resulting in considerable pain and scratches to her right side. They have a photo of the scratches in the exhibit. After ignoring her attempts to finish, such as, okay, last chair, last table, in a final effort to rationalize ending the day's activity, Ashley entered their child's bedroom to show Doug there was little to pack and move. Standing in the doorway to the child's room, Doug blocked Ashley's exit while puffing his chest, clenching his fists, and glaring at her. Trapped and frightened, she backed up further to put distance between them, but sensed an attack was imminent. Doug shouted he knew what she was doing and accused Ashley of trying to force him to leave, get rid of him, and said he was not leaving. He could stay if he wanted to and spend the night because he was her husband. Momentarily rational, Doug stepped back into the hallway, allowing Ashley to escape their daughter's room. She headed down the hallway into the living room and towards the front door. Doug, right behind her, grabbed Ashley by the left hand and yanked her back, stopping her effort to leave, shouting, "Where do you think you're going?" He moved around her to where his back was to the front door. He aggressively confronted her by blocking her path to the front door, wagging his finger in her face, saying, "You can't leave me." She found the strength to tell him, "I am done. You need to leave now." She was ignored, which at that point rendered Doug's status to that of a burglar. Ashley was terrified and braced for what she was certain would be physical impact. Her instincts were correct. Raising his right hand with a closed fist, he drove his knuckles at the second joint into the side of Ashley's head and said, "I'm not done." The impact resulted in a sharp numbing pain, which caused Ashley to stumble to her right side, and she fled to her bedroom. Her worst fears realized, Ashley now believed her life was in danger. Never before had Doug actually struck her. In the past, he psychologically abused her and intimidated her by holding her against her will, punching holes in the wall, harming their domestic animals, and shooting and throwing guns in the house. But this was different. Any restraint had been abandoned. As she entered her bedroom, Ashley swung the door behind her in an unsuccessful attempt to close the door, and the door remained open. In the bedroom was a laundry basket and cloth storage bin which rested on top of the laundry basket. Inside was a firearm legally owned by Ashley. She grabbed it and simultaneously heard the unmistakable sound of the door bounce off the door stop. She turned and saw Doug in the doorway to her bedroom with a fierce scowl. Pointing the firearm at Doug, she nervously ordered him to stop. He did not, but rather postured like a mixed martial arts fighter, blading, hands parallel with his chest and shoulders, moving his arms in small circular motions, moving toward her. Now terrified and believing she was about to suffer great bodily harm, if not death, she fired the weapon. Doug, undeterred, continued advancing. In fear for her life, Ashley moved to put distance between them, but he did not stop coming for her, and she continued firing. In what seemed like slow motion, she saw Doug's feet go up in the air as if his feet slipped out from underneath him and he fell backward. She immediately fled the residence and got help from a neighbor. Two neighborhood residents who were out walking their dog less than 30 seconds after hearing the shots saw Ashley running out of the house, gun in hand, crying and screaming what sounded like help. Ran to the house next door, pounding on the door. So, what happened at the end of this stand your ground hearing? Well, the judge denied it. In the ruling, the judge said the competent and substantial evidence presented by the state proves clearly and convincingly that the defendant is not entitled to court ordered immunity from criminal prosecution, as she was not justified in using deadly force against the victim on September 27th of 2020. The judge went on to state the state has proven by clear and convincing evidence that the victim's homicide was not a singular act of necessary self-defense, but was instead accumulation of a lengthy, concerted effort by the defendant to eliminate the victim from her life and the life of their child. When the defendant's efforts to enlist the assistance of law enforcement, child protective services, and the judicial system failed, she took matters into her own hands, as she told, there's a doctor's name here, she would. Now, at that hearing, Ashley did not take the stand and the defense didn't call any witnesses. She is still maintaining a battered spouse syndrome defense. A lot of legal analysts that I've watched feel that Ashley is going to need to take the stand and tell her side of events. We know defense attorneys do not want their clients on the stand. I think this is going to be a very interesting case to watch unfold because you do have the aspect of things that Doug admitted to in the CPS investigation that maybe don't make him look so good. But then you also have other things with Ashley that none of the allegations that she made were ever found to be credible by law enforcement and child protective services. I'm treading very carefully with this case because any claims of domestic violence to me are not something that I feel the need to judge. It's not my place, and I don't know the whole story. So I see where both sides maybe have some things in their corner that could help their case. I'm very interested to see what's allowed to come in. And I admit I've not had the time to go back and look at every single hearing to see what the judge is going to let in and what is going to be left out. And no doubt, we know they did the Google search warrant. So I'm interested to see what those searches were about, if any way they are related to the shooting of Doug. This is the last episode I'm doing on the backstory, just because we're going to start learning things Monday. I will cover that in its entirety in an hour or less. So those of you that are new to the podcast, just for this trial, what I do normally is I take 8 hours of testimony in a trial and break it down in an hour or less and just take out all the pauses and the stops and starts and the sidebars and get to the meat of it. So that way, if you can't watch or you don't want to watch for 8 hours, you know what happened that day that was big and what was testified to. Tomorrow, I am putting out an episode updating on some cases before this kicks off on Monday, just to stay current. There's been some filings in the Lori Vallow case in Arizona about street clothes and whether or not she's entitled to wear them as a defendant, even though she is a convicted murderer. Also, some Corey Richens update, Long Island serial killer. And then Monday, come watch with us. I'm hoping to live stream this. I'm still working out the details of that. I have amazing mods who keep the chat very civil. And so if you want a safe place to watch this trial where you can talk about your opinion as long as it doesn't attack other people, come watch with us because we really have a great group. All right, so we'll see you tomorrow with some updates on other cases. And until then, hope you guys have a great Friday evening. We will see you soon.